have one thing that y'all should be aware of that you may or may not be. There is a new regulation out that went into effect January 1st. That is any new business entities, this will affect your buyers. Any new business entities that are formed after January 1st of 2024, which is now, they must file a report of beneficial owners. It's called a beneficial ownership interest report. And that must be filed with fincen, which is like a financial crimes unit or something like that, within 30 days of the entity being formed. And the penalties are very severe if they fail to do that. And a beneficial owner doesn't have to be a shareholder, doesn't have to be a member of an LLC. A beneficial owner can also be somebody who just controls the entity. So if you have a CEO who does not own any shares, because the CEO controls the activities of the business, they also have to be reported. So it's kind of an interesting thing. There are roughly close to 33 million business entities in the United States that were formed prior to January 1st, 2024. All of them have to report prior to December 31st of this year. So every seller that has a business entity, that entity has to file a business, an ownership interest report, unless they sell. I mean, actually, even if they sell, if it was formed prior to January 1st, they're still supposed to report this year prior to December 31st. Even if they dissolve, if they had any assets this year and they dissolve the corporation in this year, they still have to report. So there's a lot of, it's an interesting regulation, but you guys should be aware of it because it's something that should probably be on your preliminary due diligence checklist. You may just want to ask your seller, hey, has your company reported to fincen? They're going to say, what is fincen? They're going to say, what is this BIOR report? But be aware of it. And also with your buyers, if you have a buyer coming in that's John Doe and or assignee is on the purchase agreement, and they're going to have a business entity created, then make sure when they have that business that you just remind them, because it shouldn't be your job, but you are the advisors. So you want to make sure that you remind them, hey, when you have your business entity set up, make sure that your CPA or your attorney or whoever's doing it also files that BIOR report for you.
Okay? And I think it's under fincen.gov.
Yeah.
FINCEN.gov.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. But it's not as straightforward as it sounds. So when you're talking about beneficial ownership, most people are going to look at that and say, oh, okay, well, that's shareholders, right? And it's 25% or more. So if you read the regulation and you read who has to report, but you don't really break it down, it looks on the surface, it looks like, okay, any 25% or more shareholder has to report. Well, that's not correct, because again, you could be a 1% shareholder, but you're the CEO, you have control of the organization, therefore you have to report, or a 0% shareholder, but you're CEO. So it's one of those things where there's going to be a lot of organizations, a lot of small businesses, and it primarily only affects small business, thank you, government, but what they're trying to do is stop the money laundering, right? It really goes back to the money laundering and all these business entities that are set up under other people's names and all of that to launder funds. And so they want to know who controls what. And to me, it's kind of a farce, because we all know that criminals are very reliable about self-reporting and very truthful, right? So somebody who's money laundering is, of course, going to report to, that they own all these corporations or have a beneficial interest in it. But nonetheless, it is what it is. So just something that we need to be aware of for our buyers and sellers, because I can guarantee you the majority of our buyers and sellers are going to be absolutely clueless, have never heard of this thing, don't know what, a beneficial ownership report even means, and they're not going to do it. And the problem with that is that the fines are like 500, I think it was $500 a day up to $10,000, something like that. So the fines can be pretty stiff, and we don't want our people, we don't want our buyers and sellers getting into trouble unnecessarily, or having to pay ridiculous fines like that because they were a week late because they had no clue that they were supposed to file this thing.